Hello there everyone, you've tuned in UXW Bill. In this particular video I'm going to talk about pushing a cheap computer to the absolute maximum. What kind of a cheap computer, you might be asking? Well, they don't get a whole lot cheaper than the Dell Dimension 2400. Now certainly don't get me wrong, I think the Dell Dimension 2400 was a great workhorse computer for its time. It was certainly one of the best budget-oriented computers ever offered for sale by any computer manufacturer. But time marches on, and you can't change the fact that for general desktop use, well, it's probably going to be feeling a little bit outmoded today. But it does work well for some light-duty tasks and tinkering around with various things, such as Windows 2000 running the unofficial updates that have been made available by certain enthusiast members of the Microsoft Windows 2000 user community. This particular machine is definitely running Windows 2000 with the unofficial updates, and for those of you who remember, this is the computer that came from a recycling bin at the Peoria, Illinois Superfest Hamfest. Since that video has been made discussing this system, I've talked about it here and there. I don't know how much detail I actually went into as regards installing Windows 2000 on this thing, but I know I did do some demonstrations of running contemporary software packages on it, and it actually worked quite well. This particular machine has a 2.53 gigahertz with a 533 megahertz front-side bus, full-fledged Pentium 4 microprocessor. Kind of a surprising thing for the Dimension 2400 to be shipped with, but Dell actually did offer a couple of real full-fledged, honest-to-goodness Pentium 4 processors, and it seems that at least one person out there in the world somewhere actually happened to buy one. Now, it's certainly a good chip, but there comes the bit about being rather outmoded again, and that's what we're going to upgrade today, because I have already replaced a broken optical drive, replaced the smashed hard drive with one that actually works, and I have installed a nice and shiny set of 2 gigabyte DDR memory modules in this machine. So, without an AGP slot, only some vexatious solder pads for one, there's really only one upgrade left, and that's the microprocessor. So what possible upgrade could I have in mind? This machine doesn't support an 800 megahertz front-side bus speed, and there's really only so far you can go in the land of 4 and 533 megahertz front-side bus processors. Well, in order to answer that question, we must turn to the computer shelves of doom and have a careful look around, because I'm pretty sure there's an upgrade microprocessor around here someplace. We're going further and further down, and the further down we go, the older things get. But there it is in a little black anti-static box, just the way that it was delivered to me from a seller on eBay several months ago. This, folks, is a bit of an oddity. I'll go ahead and pop it out of the box here and show you exactly what it is. This is a 533 megahertz, 3.06 gigahertz Pentium 4 microprocessor with Intel S-Spec number SL6PG. You can see right there it is very definitely a Northwood release microprocessor. What's so curious about this, it must have been an 11th hour development, but in addition to offering a faster clock speed, the fastest you can go in the 533 megahertz front-side bus arena, this microprocessor is hyper-threaded. And rather amazingly, with its latest BIOS upgrade installed, the Dimension 2400 is supposed to support this CPU. Various people, including fellow YouTuber Max Arcade, apprised me of this chip's existence, so I scouted around on eBay, found one for, I think $12.50 shipped, and here it is, several months later, actually getting around to making a video about it. So let's pop the cover off of this thing, pop out the microprocessor, and see if we can tune it up for maximum smoke. Now, just to assure all of you of my unwavering, continued commitment to producing high-quality video content here on YouTube, I've actually invested the effort to go and find my tripod. Now, if that doesn't mean this video will be of absolutely top-notch quality, I don't know what will. In fact, it might even give 4K ultra-high-definition content a run for its money. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's involved in doing this. It's pretty easy to do, unless of course you get one of these Dell machines like my old Dimension 2300 that I used to use on my live streams as a music player, where this little green hood is actually jammed down and you cannot get it to come up without resorting to crowbars and other exceptionally violent means. If you plan to effect this upgrade in your own Dell Dimension 2400 personal computer system, I must caution you to be extremely careful with this plastic surround and these clips around the CPU socket, because if there's one thing that the Pentium 4 microprocessor is good for, that would be generating copious quantities of heat. And copious quantities of heat, paired with the effects of time, proceed and conspire to make plastic brittle. And I have had a couple of these things snap when I have been taking them apart on other Dell systems of this era. I think this one may be slightly broken, because those of you who watched the video about my reviving and restoring this system to life after the Hamfest will readily be able to recite, well, you already know that this particular system put up a heck of a fight with a stubborn screw. And sure enough, that thing is broken. You can probably see it down there. See if we can zoom in here. I don't think I'm going to try to reposition the camera other than by virtue of walking into the tripod, which I will probably do before all this is said and done. So let's go ahead and see if I can get this out of here without completely screwing up the whole works. These stupid little plastic clips are not easy to release. And if I manage to break this, well, that's going to put the brakes on the upgrade train, because I haven't got a system from which I can rob that part. The one in the Dimension 2300, which is long since deceased, although it is merely across the room, it too is broken. Here's the scary part, folks. You got to go ahead and release this thing and lift the heatsink up. And don't be surprised if when you do this, if the microprocessor doesn't come with it. And we got lucky in this case, although I forgot to remove this one over here. But we'll just pretend it didn't happen that way and that I actually handled this like a boss and couldn't have done it any more perfectly. Likewise, it does not appear that I actually repasted this microprocessor, because I thought that was probably of dubious benefit, considering that I was simply reinstalling the old chip after placing the motherboard back into the case and repairing. Yes, repairing is the word for what I did to the VGA port representing the onboard video. Alright, so let's go ahead and stick the new microprocessor in here. These can only go in one way unless you're equipped with a mallet. And this one seems to have set itself in quite nicely. So now we'll go ahead and lock this down. And the next thing I've got to do is figure out just where in the heck my heatsink compound is. And believe me, folks, with my typical sense of organization, I could probably find it in 30 seconds flat. But the problem is I have since cleaned things up here in the Fortress of Amplitude room, and now I can't find anything. So just imagine a great deal of my running around like a chicken with its head cut off and using various forms of bad language until eventually I find the heatsink compound, which will naturally be in the last place that I was looking for it. Okay, I'm back, and sure enough, searching for the heatsink compound went about as well as I expected it to, which is to say not very. But I did at least find it in the last place that I was looking, at the risk of making a very, very old joke. Now, the nice folks at Arctic Silver, whose heatsink compound I am using for this, and no, I am by no means a compensated endorser for their product, just a satisfied user, they suggest that you should tint or pre-apply the heatsink compound to the bottom of the heatsink that you have, and that's what this is a rather sorry excuse for doing. Then, once you have done that, you're supposed to go back to your computer, just like this, thanks to the magic of tripod-related adjustments. And you are supposed to, if you have a Pentium 4 single-core microprocessor such as this, place a nice little dot of Arctic Silver right in the center of the microprocessor. That's probably too big of a dot, but it's what you get. And then you mash the whole mess together. And again, we want to be very, very careful with this, because this is already kind of broken. Now, once that heatsink compound sets up, it'll do a pretty good job of holding that heatsink in place. In fact, as I said earlier, if you go to remove the heatsink from your own system, don't be surprised if the microprocessor is violently jerked out of the socket along with it and firmly affixed to the bottom of the heatsink. But we're not quite there yet, so we're going to put everything back just as Dell had it when this system was new. These green things are a little fiddly, and I have to admit, I do not completely understand their purpose. Let's see if we can get that to go back in there like it's supposed to. Of course, being as I'm on video and subject to embarrassing myself in front of an audience of potentially thousands of people, it won't work the way it's supposed to. Well, we know exactly how that goes. Now I've got to do this other one. And of course, the one that doesn't face the camera is the one that went in perfectly. And that, of course, leaves us with a newly retired, but still perfectly useful, Pentium 4 microprocessor clocked at 2.53 gigahertz. Go ahead and throw that back into the box that the new one came out of. Interestingly, there's a lint ball in the bottom of the pins. Amazing that it worked. Don't know how that got there, unless it picked it up off the table just now. We'll put that in the box and save that for a deserving computer that is unfortunately malnourished in the central processing unit department. And then it's time to go ahead and flip this thing down, plug the computer in, and use that phrase that all of you love so very, very much. Smoke test! Got a green power light at least. And a power on self-test. Well, we'll go into setup and just make sure that everything seems to be okay over in there. You talk about optimism. I even put the side panel back on the case. Because my confident air is just how I roll, folks. Wow, I can't believe I used an expression like that. Alright, let's see what we've got here. I think this is under, what, the CPU information category? Yes, indeed it is. We have our new clock speed. Hyperthreading is disabled. Now, whether to enable hyperthreading or not under an operating system such as Windows 2000 that does not explicitly support it, well, that just happens to be a matter of some debate. But my opinion is that it certainly won't hurt anything to enable it, because even though it might be of marginal benefit and the operating system itself might not support it, application software running on top of that operating system certainly can. And a single-core system such as this is definitely at something of a disadvantage here in this multi-core modern computing world that we live in. So let's go ahead and just see if this thing actually happens to boot up like it's supposed to. Getting through the power on self-test is one thing. Getting into the operating system and getting some productive work done, well, that's another kettle of fish entirely. So we'll see what we've got here just as soon as the power on self-test concludes. But it certainly looks like it's going to think about booting, at least. And there we go, Windows 2000 running on the extended kernel with unofficial updates. I do still plan to make a video about the process of installing Windows 2000 updates, but just like the NEC PowerMate Eco, which I have certainly not forgotten about, it might be a little bit down the pipe yet. So please do be patient with me in that regard. Other project videos that I have not forgotten about making include the PXE boot server based around the ERPXE project. So I'll go ahead and get logged into this system and be right back. Now, if you want to be sure that you're getting all the performance that's possible from your newly upgraded microprocessor, some operating systems will adapt automatically and start using the new features. Others, such as Microsoft Windows 2000 and XP, well, they need a little bit of encouragement, and in order to give them that kind of encouragement, we need to head into the Device Manager. So we'll go ahead and bring that up, and the category that we need to bring up is actually the Computer category, which right now says that this is an ACPI uniprocessor PC. Now, even though this is not a true multiprocessor platform, we need to go ahead and force the computer to think that it is. And in order to go about doing that, we need to view the properties of the ACPI Uniprocessor PC category, head on over to the Driver tab, and choose to update the driver. Now, we're not really going to update the driver, we're just going to make sure that Windows has the right idea. So we need to tell Windows to display a list of known drivers for the device so that we can choose a specific one. And there is the choice for the ACPI Multiprocessor PC. So go ahead and click on through to that. Let it install itself. And then we need to restart the computer, which we can certainly do right now. But before I do that, I will go ahead and say that I have been doing some burn-in testing on this system just to help the Arctic Silver heatsink compound set in a little bit faster. This is the distributed.NET Distributed Computing Client. Right now it's cracking RC5-72 encryption. The other project they have is a project where they use mathematical equations to determine what are known as optimal Golomb rulers. Now, I'm not much of a math whiz, so if you want to know more about that, you should look it up on their website, because they will tell you anything and everything that you want to know. Basically, it's got something to do, I think, with finding long strings of number sequences that have prime numbers in them or something. But I'm probably completely wrong, so just forget that I ever said anything about that. And we'll go ahead and let this computer restart here. And thanks to the magic of video editing, we'll be back in a flash of the screen, it would seem. Upon the computer's restarting, and if you happen to get things right, various System Task Monitor utilities should show the existence of what would appear to be 2 microprocessor cores. Now, of course, hyperthreading does not give you a real secondary microprocessor core, but it does let the operating system and the microprocessor try to schedule things to make use of idle units inside the microprocessor, which is basically the entire point of hyperthreading. So the Windows Task Manager should show it, and other popular task management utilities such as sysinternal's Process Explorer should show the existence of more than one processor as well, though you may need to prod them a little bit by turning on the Show One Graph Per CPU indication so that you actually get 2 separate graphs separated by a thin line that you might be able to see if it survives the video compression process. But even though it's indicating more than one processor core and slightly different usage figures amongst them, sysinternal's Process Explorer does in fact have the technical details right. Windows Task Manager, on the other hand, can't really give us enough details, but it doesn't really matter. It's a superficial indication anyway. And with that done, it's time to reap the benefits of our improved performance. So how can we do that? Well, you could run benchmarks, you could try to play games, but I really don't recommend you do those things on a 2003 era personal computer, especially if they're modern games, because that might result in some big flames coming out of the machine, and we don't want that. How about some practical stuff? Well, we could probably open up, if I've got it on this machine. Does not appear I have LibreOffice on this machine because the latest releases do not run under Windows 2000 even with the unofficial updates, but a web browser certainly does. This is the Windows XP build of the Pale Moon web browser. Another web browser that works just fine is the nightly build of Firefox, at least as of the time that this video is being created. And as soon as it comes up here, you can see that it will probably come up in its lovely, and I mean that in the most sarcastic sense possible, Australis interface, because Classic Theme Restorer is apparently not yet compatible with the latest nightly build of Firefox, which I believe is version 443. Yes, it is. So it's entirely possible that by the time you're watching this video, Firefox nightly builds will no longer function on unofficially updated copies of Windows 2000, but at least in the here and now, when this video is made, they work perfectly well. So what could we do that's fairly demanding with a web browser? Well, we could certainly go to YouTube, and where better to go on YouTube than to YouTube's best channel, which just happens to belong to my brother. And you know it's true, because you're reading it on the internet. Unfortunately, YouTube no longer allows you to have a custom title, to the best of my knowledge, so it simply says The Keykeeper. And we could go ahead and watch one of the Keykeeper's videos, but in order to do that, we're going to need sound capability. And I may want to turn the volume down on the stereo here while I'm doing this, because otherwise I might pop an eardrum or maybe kill someone who's out in the viewing audience with headphones, and heaven knows we wouldn't want that. I have used the onboard sound hardware on this machine in the past, so presumably it works. Let's go ahead and turn up the volume here, and let's watch a video. What should we watch a video about? Well, I think we could do a lot of things. Probably watch a video about a bored keykeeper. This might really be pushing things. You can see that it tried to instantiate the HTML5 video playback, but unfortunately I don't think that works, and part of the reason it might not work, as fellow YouTuber Mr. McGuire would call it, would be this machine's having Intel Extreme graphics. Actually, I think the i8-45 that this thing uses is called Extreme 2. Well, you know what they say, nothing times nothing is still nothing. So let's go ahead here and see if we can play the video at 360p. We're not getting any sound. Maybe because I don't have it turned up enough.
On Sunday afternoon, January 11th, 2015.
Speaking of, you should tell the Keykeeper to make some more videos. He's confided to me that he actually plans to, but he's busy or something, I don't know. All seriousness, he is actually pretty busy with work. Let's go ahead and step it up to 480p and see if this machine can still handle it. Okay, that was interesting. I guess it was reaching a keyframe there or something. Hard to tell. But we'll go ahead and give it a second or two. I'm assuming it's really rendering 480p video here, and we'll see if this system can still keep up with it.
And I'm going to do a little bit of a crazy video here. Kind of silly, something I usually don't do.
Of course, it ought to be able to render a dark frame like that perfectly, so let's skip ahead a little bit here.
Before it starts, or, you know, what's in my toolbox today, stuff like that. But this video is kind of, you know, Sunday afternoon, crazy.
Alright, let's go for broke. This one is not only going to tax the computer, probably break the computer, it's certainly going to tax my internet connection. And for all of you out there who say, you should upload videos in high definition again, I want you to know I don't even watch YouTube in high definition. Partially because I don't see the need, and secondarily because it pushes my connection a little bit too hard. 720p is about the best that I can manage with 3 megabits coming in here. That's what you get when you're in the sticks and the cable company isn't doing it for you. Alright, here we are. We've switched this thing up to 720p. Do I dare take it full screen? I think we won't try to push our luck that hard. We'll go ahead and try it non-full screen first and see what it does. And if it doesn't go up in flames and smoke, then we'll try going to full screen.
I'm bored, so we don't know what a bored UXW build does, but what does a bored Keykeeper do?
Well, let me just tell you, that is extremely impressive. I wouldn't say it's managing to deliver 30 frames per second, but it's making an extremely valiant effort, and it's watchable. Alright, here we go, pulling out all the last of the stops. Full screen it is. A 15-inch panel like this I don't think is going to be able to render 720p, although I could be wrong about that. Shows you what I know about high-definition video, doesn't it? So we'll go ahead and turn it back on and see what happens.
I'll show you. I've got a hallway here that's got a wood panel floor, and I'm going to set up
got a little blocky there.
On this, this is, it's a stereo. I don't know that much about it. But I'm going to set up my camera right here on the edge of the stereo. Hopefully it'll stand up by itself.
I could not honestly tell you what the blockiness indicates unless it's the compression, the decompression routines not being able to keep up. Now this is with Flash Player, and it pains me greatly to say it, but Flash Player is somehow, amazingly enough, more optimized than the HTML5 built-in codecs on any web browser that I have used. That's a pitiful state of affairs. I hope that it will certainly improve in time. But that's pretty impressive, folks. It's not necessarily getting it done, but it's coming very close to trying to play 720p video right now. And it could probably resolve the 720 part, because we have 768 pixels worth of resolution in one direction, but it couldn't manage the 1280 because we only have 1024 to play with, and I'm not feeling sufficiently motivated to go and get a bigger LCD panel. Let's face it, this is pretty amazing as it is right now. So go ahead and turn that off, put that away for the time being. I certainly think that for $12.50 some odd cents that I think I paid for this upgrade microprocessor, that it was unquestionably worth the money. And I'm sure that many of you might share that observation as well. Just imagine how well this machine would do, even though it doesn't have an AGP slot, with some sort of PCI video card in place that could offload some of the video processing strain and probably would let you play 1080p content and 720p content without any restrictions whatsoever. I don't imagine you can hope for 4K, and I'm not even going to try that on my connection. So, as always, thank you all for watching. Do feel free to leave a comment if you have one. And until next time, folks, this is UXW Bill signing off.